A Better World Blueprint. Good humans doing good things.
Sometimes the state of the world can feel too much. Too much hatred, intolerance, greed. But human rights activist Desmond Tutu once said, "Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world." This podcast will show you just how those little bits of good add up to a turning of the tide. How there are people who are working to make this world better, people who will make you feel more hopeful for the future. I'm Siobhan Hunt. Welcome to A Better World Blueprint. For my guest today, leaving the world a better place is an immediate and pressing concern. Nic Seton is the CEO of Parents for Climate, a non-profit run by parents for parents to protect the environment for our children's future. Prior to his role at Parents for Climate, Nic worked at Greenpeace Australia and the UK and the Worldwide Fund for Nature. I hope you enjoy this chat with Nic Seton, CEO of Parents for Climate. Hello, Nic, and welcome to A Better World Blueprint.
Hi, thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I know that you have worked previously at Greenpeace and Worldwide Fund for Nature, so there's a definite theme there. But I'm wondering what led you to the work you're doing now, and if there was a particular wake-up moment in your life where you were thinking, this is what I have to do, this is my purpose.
So, in my role at Parents for Climate, I get to work on something that's really dear to my heart, which is not just protecting the climate and, making the environment safe and enjoyable for myself, but it's really because I see it now through my kids' eyes. And in some ways, it sounds like a cliche, sort of having an epiphany after becoming a parent. And it's something that I think a lot of men don't talk about often enough. But there is this very real and quite confronting realization that actually I'm not the most important person in the world, and that my kids need not just care, but they need an advocate. They need a champion. And the world and the rules that we have for the world we have at the moment aren't set up in their best interests. And it really dawned on me during the Black Summer bushfires. I live in Sydney. I didn't even see flames, but we saw 90 days of smoke. And my son, who's 7 now, he was 3 at the time. And he really struggled during that 90 days of smoke to breathe. He ended up hospitalized with acute bronchiolitis several times. And we tried living normally, tried to just think this will pass over. We didn't know when it was going to end or even how to deal with it. But we had an old house we couldn't keep the smoke out of, and he had a childcare centre that couldn't keep the smoke out. And eventually they would call me while I was at work and say, he's struggling to breathe. You need to come and get him. And I was in tears. I was just so nervous. I was I was scared, with a sense of not just a fear, but a loss of a disempowerment, which shook me to the core and made me realize that if this is a risk that our kids can face in a place as safe as Sydney feels like most of the time, then that is cause enough for alarm and for action. And that's really the lightning bolt that I needed to dive into this all the way.
Given that you had worked in advocacy prior to this position with Parents for Climate, was the next step easy for you? Did you know where to look to try and make the greatest impact? Or how did you take the next step after you realised that this was something you needed to do something about?
I think that I realised that I needed people around me that understood how I felt, and quite quickly fell into the crowd with Parents for Climate, because there was a community get-together organised at a bolo near me, and it was during the smoke event, and we couldn't see more than 50 metres, but we found our way to the bolo, and inside were all of these mums and dads from all across the city who had heard about this meetup and had never met each other before, but all wanted to talk about what should we do. And none of them had the power to do it alone, but all of us had immense influence together. And it was a moment where I walked away feeling like there was something special about that moment, something special about seeing people come together and have a conversation about what can we do in a moment when it just really wasn't clear and it felt like an emergency. That was really inspiring. So I dived in. I signed up as a volunteer. I got involved in the local meetups, and then eventually I found my way into the role as CEO. For me, that was part of a long realization that had, I think, always been front of mind for me all throughout my career, working in some really big environment organizations with enormous resources and influence, but realizing that we weren't winning fast enough.
Mm.
And this expression, it's a negative one, but it's one that motivates me, which is that winning slowly is the same as losing when it comes to protecting the environment for our kids. And so we needed something that was going to be more effective and more disruptive in a constructive way. And that's when I kind of put two and two together and saw that if parents who, you know, occupy an enormous amount of influence in our society have more networks than anybody else. There's 12.5 million of them in Australia. Every 2 out of 3 voters is a parent. They have enormous power. And if that can be put to good use with a little bit of coordination and maybe a few meetups in a bolo, then wow, that's unstoppable. And that's much more than I had worked with before.
That's a really powerful start. And I don't mean to move on from that to something challenging, but did you ever stumble along the path? Because, as you say, winning slowly is losing with the environment, and you do have that immediate pressing need to do something. Were there stumbles along the way?
Look, naturally, yes. This isn't easy. It can be fun and it can be invigorating, but it's challenging to create a world that you haven't seen yet. And leading an organization like Parents for Climate is a privilege, but it's also got, it comes with a lot of responsibility. And I've really struggled to find out how to crack the problems of getting the resources that we need, fundraising, getting the political attention from people that are trying to frankly ignore us and want us to go away, always being inclusive when there might be different points of view in the room, and finding a way to sort of keep momentum going when on an issue like climate change, it feels like a forever problem sometimes. And look, in all honesty, there are days I wake up tired, more tired than I've been in any other job. And that's, I guess, part of the reality of trying to bite off more than we can chew because we feel that sense of urgency. But at the same time, I've also learned a really powerful lesson, a very humbling lesson in this job, which is that actually I can't do it all. And that's great because I have to ask for help. And if I find that help, if I do actually get up and honestly, openly, vulnerably ask for help, then I will find it. And it's always come through. And I think that's the lesson that if I could talk to myself at the start of this job, I wish I could give that pointer, because it's taken me a little while to learn what that actually means. And the stumbles are not stumbles that I need to face on my own, nor are they necessarily stumbles that I can face on my own. But there are a lot of people who are here and willing to join me and to support what it is that we're trying to do together.
Has the work changed you, do you think?
Look, definitely. I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing. I never thought I'd be, on the media as much as I have been. Like this week, for example, we've just settled a major court case with the third largest polluter and third largest energy retailer, Energy Australia. And I never thought I would be bending their will to tell the truth about their pollution through litigation. I never thought I'd be able to get the minister's attention on our core asks and win significant progress on things like household batteries. I never thought I'd be in those positions. And I don't think there's anything that makes me particularly special about that. I think it's just I've found a community of people who want to work together to make it happen.
You've just mentioned some really significant wins there for Parents for Climate. Is that the kind of impact you see from your work in terms of big policy changes? It's kind of a real long-term investment what you're doing, isn't it? So I'm just wondering how you measure the success of what you're doing.
We're trying to fix a big problem which the world is facing, and that is we've woken up to and started to reckon with runaway pollution levels. And that's not easy to fix overnight. It's something that needs to be measured in progress and steps. And while we need to aim high all the time, every molecule of carbon dioxide and methane emissions that we can avoid is meaningful. And so we're really trying to celebrate, I think, more than just absolute victory. It's kind of on a multi-level approach. One is we want to really celebrate the things that each individual does. And so every time a parent connects with Parents for Climate, or someone takes some advice or follows some of our guidance with regards to how they can, exercise more control in their lives or reduce the impact of their pollution through their own consumption and so on, that's fantastic. And it's not just because it has terrific individual effect, but because it really emboldens the spirit of those people to realize they have influence and they can do more. The second thing we really celebrate is building community around this, not just because community is part of the cure to dealing with big problems, which I've kind of already touched on, but also because that community is going to be essential to being able to shift some of the harder to move problems, like difficult political questions, things that are naturally going to require some level of negotiation or compromise. We need to come together and build bridges and not build walls, because we're not going to get anywhere if these difficult problems remain politicized and polarized. We really need to find a way forward together that benefits as many people as possible. And lastly, we really want to celebrate when we do see power shift, when we see power beyond the individual, beyond the community, but at the higher levels, like in a company, a major corporation, or with governments, because those are the constructs that we as individuals and communities support and create, and we've given them power, but we also have power to move them and get them to do the right thing. And so this week, for example, Energy Australia, the third largest polluter and third largest retailer, has effectively agreed to all of the arguments in our greenwashing case that we took against them in the federal court. They've agreed to all the facts. They've made public statements to that effect. They've agreed to drop the offending product. They've agreed to communicate with all their customers and make a public apology. And these feel like small wins sometimes, but then if we zoom out, that's going to affect every other company that's doing similar things. It's going to affect the way in which carbon credits and offsets have been used as a license to pollute throughout government and corporate sector in Australia. And it's going to affect the way that other countries start to view this conversation as well, because even though it might be in a different jurisdiction, those arguments can be applied and taken to other parts of the world. So we're really excited by these seemingly small steps and small progress points, because they can be amplified and they can have huge ramifications if we keep pushing as a community, working constructively together. And ultimately, we've got to keep focused on the prize. I heard from an IPCC scientist who gave a webinar presentation to our supporter base, that something that really motivated me, which was, if we get it right, if we work together on climate change, yes, the next few decades are going to be a little bit tougher because some of those consequences are here to stay, but we can turn this around in our lifetimes, not just our kids' lifetimes, but in our lifetimes as parents alive today. We may be able to see a return to a safer climate future, which doesn't threaten the fabric of our society. And that's something that I find really motivating, because that's a gap that we can live to close.
Do you think that's part of the equation that people need, is that hope that it is possible to create meaningful change, as you say, for our children? Because as I said at the very beginning of this interview, it can feel so overwhelming and so big, and like not enough is happening fast enough. But is that idea that if we all band together, we can actually slow it down, eventually maybe even stop it? I don't know. Is that really important? Is that a message you think that we need to get through to people? Because I'm not hearing that, I must admit. I'm not hearing anything very hopeful about how we might address this problem.
Look, I think hope is critical, but on its own, it doesn't work. It has to be meaningful hope. Active hope, of course, is a really important phrase. But I think there was a bit of a moment for a lot of people, particularly people who are already engaged on trying to solve a problem like climate change. After the US election, more recently in November 2024, seeing Donald Trump return to office and remove the US from global cooperation on climate change, I think there was this moment of realizing that this isn't just a natural roller coaster that, everyone ends up having fun and we all get to a better place. Like this could go any which way, and it requires a degree of strategy and pragmatism. Some people call it being realistic. And I think that's true. We have to kind of confront the reality, which is that this is hard and it requires hard work, and it's not going to be won through partisanship or political fights. It's going to be won through connection and community and really building common ground around an issue that we all have some stake in, because we all want to protect the people we love, the communities we love, the places we love. And that's something we can all agree on. And that's a fantastic starting point. That gives me hope. And it's something we can work on, which is meaningful. From that, we can build so much more. And we've seen already in Australia this year, our federal election was largely affected by things like energy policy, which is a proxy for pollution and climate change, and the concern the public has around that. And it's so exciting to see that there's a fairly clear message that people want to see clean energy continue. They want to see improvement. They want to see pragmatic and effective reforms in that space, rather than reactionary or partisan and largely polarized responses. And so I'm adamant that hope is important, but it has to be given meaning through that kind of acceptance that, yes, we've got hard work to do, but we shouldn't be afraid of that. And as parents, we're not. We never would be. We do that for our kids, whatever they need, we're there. And frankly, we may be busy, parents being some of the most time poor in the society we have, but they're very effective. If you want something done, give it to a busy parent. And I've never believed that more than since I joined this organization. Wow, they show up. They show up and they're very effective.
Well, I love it. And I do think that that's a really positive place for us to end this conversation. Nic, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Nic Seton, CEO of Parents for Climate. And I'm always on the lookout for people like Nic. So if you know anyone, let me know. You'll find my email in the episode notes. I'm Siobhan Hunt. See you next time on A Better World Blueprint.